everyone, this is going to be a quick video talking about the samurai Miyamoto Musashi. I'm making this video because June 13th is the day that Miyamoto Musashi died. He was born, of course, to a samurai family and was raised until the age of 9 by his father. His father was very abusive to him and would even throw knives at him to scold him. By the age of 9, he ran away from home to live with his mother and was raised from there on by his uncle. Now, it's not known whether he was trained up to the age of 9 or from the age of 9. But his uncle, who was a monk, allowed him to live with him. At the age of 13, Musashi had his first duel against another samurai named Akira Kihei. Akira Kihei was a swordsman from the Shinto style, and what happened was Akira Kihei was putting placards everywhere announcing a challenge to whoever would take it. Well, the 13-year-old Musashi took and wrote his name on one of the placards, which basically meant, "I will fight you." Akira Kihei found the placard and, of course, was ready to do the duel. When the duel was about to take place, Musashi's uncle was actually trying to talk Akira Kihei out of the duel, based on his nephew's age. But what happened after that was Musashi took a staff and attacked Akira Kihei without even bowing, while yelling, "I challenge you." Afterwards, during the duel, Musashi picked up Akira Kihei, threw him to the ground, and beat him to death with a staff. At the age of 16, Miyamoto Musashi fought in the Battle of Sekigahara on the losing side, and from there on he became a wanderer. So he wandered around engaging in duels. And there are quite a few famous duels that did take place that he did. Some of his duels that he did was, for example, against the Yoshioka school. He first challenged the eldest to a duel in which he arrived late, to which he then killed the eldest, to which the younger brother then challenged him, and he crippled his arm. He arrived late to the second duel as well, which arriving late is typically, it's a huge insult in samurai culture that, you know, I'm challenging you, yet I'm going to be late to the duel and show up whenever I feel like it. It's typically not something that you do. After the first two duels, he was challenged by another one of the Yoshioka school, but it was actually an ambush. And he got wind of this, but he couldn't not show up because his honor was at stake. So he actually went on the way, and he was about to stop at a Shinto shrine to pray, which is something that normally he never did. He'd never pray for victory, which is definitely different because most of the time samurai would pray for victory. He was about to ring the bell at the Shinto shrine when all of a sudden he stopped. He realized that he'd never prayed for victory before, so why start now? So from there, he backed up, bowed to the shrine, and continued on his way. In the ambush, he decided to change up his tactics. Instead of arriving late, like the first two duels, he decided to arrive early. Another thing he did was he had used both of his swords at once, his katana and his wakizashi, because he was a firm believer in using two weapons, using both hands. In arriving early, he then yelled to them, "Did I surprise you?" and started fighting from there. He then fought off all the would-be ambushers and didn't get injured. Only thing that came even close to injuring him was an arrow, which pierced his sleeve. But other than that, he wasn't injured. So he fought off an ambush and he won. When you read his book that he writes later in life, a lot of his tactics came from that battle, that fight. You will read that he says, it's okay to do the same thing twice in a row, but never 3 times. And that is why, in this fight, he showed up late twice, but he didn't do it the 3rd time. Because after the 3rd time, the enemy begins to expect it. You know, you do it once, do it twice, the enemy might expect you to do it again, but then if you do something different, then you will surprise them. You will also read in the Book of Five Rings his strategy of moving side to side, and a lot of other things that he used in the duel. Some say that the reason that Miyamoto Musashi so easily beated the Yoshioka school is because their techniques were severely outdated. They were from back when armor was still being used and armor was no longer in use. And because of that, there was a lot of things that held them back as a school. Later on, he had a fight with a Kusarigama wielder named Shishido Baiken. And in this duel, it is one that actually almost cost him his life. The Kusarigama is a very difficult weapon to fight against. Musashi even says so himself. In his Book of Five Rings, he says, in the hands of an adept, the Kusarigama is one of the most difficult weapons to fight. Because of the fact that it's a long-range weapon, it's a short-range weapon, it's a mid-range weapon, it has all the ranges covered because the chain can be held any way that you need to use it. And it still has a sickle. Plus the chain can be used to entangle the enemy. So when he fought Shishido Baiken, once again he used two swords. And the chain got entangled around his katana. So what he did was he took his wakizashi and threw it at Shishido Baiken, stabbing him right in the heart. The fight was over. But it was definitely a close call. Another popular fight that Miyamoto Musashi fought was against the samurai Muso Jinosuke Katsuyoshi, and he was a master of many different kinds of weapons. He later came to invent the Jo staff. So, a little bit of the background of Muso Jinosuke Katsuyoshi is that he was a master of the yari, the bow staff, the naginata, and several other weapons. He fought a duel against Musashi, who was using one or two bokken. This is a bit disputed as to whether it was one or two that he was using. But in the end, Musashi beat him using, his bokken or bokkens. So he walked away and came up with a new weapon. The new weapon was the Jo staff. Now the thing with the Jo staff is that it is multiple weapons in one. You can use it as a bow staff, a yari, or a naginata all at one time, and it still has the serious advantage of range. It's a longer weapon than the katana. When they fought again on the second time, it was a tie. Now, Miyamoto Musashi says it was a tie. Some say that it wasn't a tie, that Musashi did get beat. It's unknown which one it is that's true, which is also interesting because Miyamoto Musashi claims to have had 60 duels throughout his life and he never lost a single one. Afterwards, Muso Jinosuke Katsuyoshi actually came up with his own style called Shinto Muso-ryu, which has its basis around the Jo staff. Now, one of the more famous duels that Musashi fought was against Sasaki Kojiro when he used a boat oar similar to this bokken right here. He took a boat oar, carved it into a bokken, and he fought using this against Sasaki Kojiro, who was using a nodachi, similar size to this one right here. The reason why Musashi used the boat oar is because, as you can see, the boat oar has some serious length over the nodachi. So this gave him the advantage of range over Sasaki Kojiro. So in the duel, once again Musashi arrived late to Sasaki Kojiro, which angered Sasaki Kojiro. And then he showed up with this, as if to say, I don't really need a real sword, I just need this to kill you. So Sasaki Kojiro, angered, ran up to Musashi and asked him, are you late because you are afraid? To which then Sasaki Kojiro then drew his sword and threw away the saya. Miyamoto Musashi then looked at him and said, you have already lost. The reason why he said that is because the way he looked at it was, to throw away your saya as if you would never need it again means that you really don't have much hope of going out of this duel alive. So angered, Sasaki Kojiro went up to him and went to do his famous Tsubame Gaeshi, which is the turning swallows cut. To which then Miyamoto Musashi then backed up just enough for the cut to miss, and then went down on Sasaki Kojiro's head with his weapon. Afterwards, the duel was over. Now there's a lot of versions of the story. Some say that the cut did connect and it did cut him slightly. Some say that the cut only cut off Musashi's headband, and others say that it missed completely. I am more inclined to believe that either it missed completely or that it did cut him a little bit on the head, because it's just not very likely that he did cut off his headband. After this duel with Sasaki Kojiro, Miyamoto Musashi never again fought to the death in a duel. So after that, there was a lot of other things that he did. There was a story that once a daimyo asked him to teach his men, his style of kenjutsu. He then looked at all these men and pointed out this one and said to him that out of all his men, this one is the bravest and the best. And he asked the samurai his name and what style it is that he studies and how often he practices. The samurai looked back at him and says, "I barely practice at all. But what I do is I take my sword and hang it by a thread over my head, and I sleep that way." Then from there, Musashi said that of all of the daimyo's men, this is the best one. Reason being is because he has the very likelihood of dying every night. He knows that it wouldn't take much for that thread to break, and he would die. So he knows the way of looking into the face of death. So he then trained him. There's also stories of Musashi teaching Shuriken Jutsu, which is the art of throwing spikes and things like that. And he did have another style that he had earlier on that he called Enmei-ryu. But it later got changed to what is now known as Nitenichi-ryu. Some say that Enmei-ryu is still around, others say that it is not. It's not really known whether or not it is. Towards the end of his life, he ended up making a replica of the boat oar that he used to kill Sasaki Kojiro with. At the age of 61, Miyamoto Musashi died, but before he died, he wrote Gori no Sho, or the Book of Five Rings, which he wrote in a cave. He was in the cave to meditate, and it was a good quiet place for him to write his book. He also wrote The Way of Walking Alone. It's unknown what he exactly died of. Some say it was stomach cancer, some say it was emphysema. No one exactly knows. But what we do know is that when he died, his Book of Five Rings he gifted to one of his students. That student, he then took the book and was supposed to basically burn it afterwards. But another student asked to read it, and which the one who was given the book respected his wishes and did give it to him so that he could read it. But then the one who was loaned the book basically copied the book so that, it wouldn't be really lost to the world. When Miyamoto Musashi died, he took his wakizashi, put it in his obi, sat himself up, had his cane out, and he died in that position. In his Book of Five Rings, there were many things on his opinions on other styles and things like that. One thing that he wrote is that he did not like Shinto-ryu. The reason why he didn't like Shinto-ryu is because he didn't believe in, praying or relying on the gods to win. In the Book of Five Rings, he even said, "Respect the gods and Buddhas, but do not rely on them." And that is why he did not like Shinto-ryu. He also has an interesting bit in the book about selecting a sword length. One thing that he said was that a sword that is too long, it may be useful for fighting, but at times it'll get in the way, and a problem with it wasn't so much the sword as much as the mind that goes with the sword. And that is this: if you are always too afraid to get in close, then in reality you're not really on the offensive, you are in the defensive, at least in your mind. Although he did also think that swords like that had their place in war. But also, he didn't like swords that were too short, and the reason for that was also very simple. Because if the sword is so short, once again, you will basically always be on the defensive. You won't really be able to be on the offensive because your sword will be too short. you will have to have great strategy for using that. And no matter what, you'll be waiting for the person to make a mistake. Once again, on the defensive, you won't be able to be on the offensive. There's quite a bit in there also on strategy, which is another good thing that is always good to know. And if you ever have the time to read the Book of Five Rings, if you never have read it, then it is definitely a good thing to read, and you should do so. So, that's pretty much it. I hope this was helpful and informative. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I'll see you in the next video. See ya!